Hello, my name is John E. DuPont. I believe an athlete should always listen to his coach. I believe every coach should train their athlete in a way that is severe and as brutal and as honestly that it will take to win victory at the Olympics. I also believe that Tom Richardson has a movie review for the new Bennett Miller film, Foxcatcher. And I will go away now because this is not a very good Johnny DuPont impression that Steve Carell betrayed in a much better fashion than Tom Richardson is doing right now. So, hey everybody. Yeah, it was my very pathetically betrayed impression of what Steve Carell did as Johnny DuPont as in this new Bennett Miller film called Foxcatcher. In Foxcatcher, you guys, this is based off of the real story of Mark Schultz, the Olympic wrestler who had a coach named John E. DuPont, who he kind of had a dark on and off friendship and athlete to coach relationship with that got very dark and very ugly over the course of time of the two of them working together as a coach and athlete for the Olympic wrestling events that they were both a part of. Also in this film, because of this so-called friendship that the two of them formed. A character played by Mark Ruffalo, who was the brother of Mark Schultz. Mark Schultz is played by Channing Tatum. Um, he basically gets involved after a while. You never really quite know why Johnny DuPont also wants this. And actually, by the way, too, I don't know if I mentioned this yet. Mark Ruffalo's character is also the brother of Channing Tatum's character. So that's Mark Schultz's brother. Um, Basically, he gets them involved. He really wants to train this Mark Schultz guy really well because he's won I think 2 Olympic gold medals at this point in the movie, and he basically will do whatever it takes to make sure that Mark continues winning these awards and that he gets this big recognition as this coach that he's been getting. And so you really never quite know why he also wants this additional coach to help Mark out with these events. But over the course of time, you find out exactly why that is, and why this so-called friendship that he formed with Mark Schultz um, also got this other coach involved, and why he wanted that to be the case. Of two coach coaching this athlete rather than just himself coaching all this time. And by the way, it's also called Foxcatcher because um, Channing Tatum's character is being coached at something called Foxcatcher Farms, which is what Johnny DuPont trained his Olympic athletes at back when he was around. Um, so overall, guys, I'm not a huge fan of Bennett Miller. I did see Moneyball and I did see Capote, two other films that he also directed. He seems to like biopics because both of those films are also based off real events and real people. And one thing I don't really care about Bennett Miller as a director is I think he's not very good at pacing. He doesn't know how to pace a story very well. He knows how to shoot a film really well. He knows how to get really good performances out of his actors and actresses. But I think Bennett Miller in general just really needs to work on pacing. I think he spends too much time on things that he doesn't need to, and I think he tends to stray from the point of his movie a little bit too long. And I think Foxcatcher definitely continues that trend that I feel he needs to work on as a director. And it's really too bad because the Film Academy seems to love him, and almost all of the stuff he's released so far has gotten Oscar recognition, something that Foxcatcher is probably going to get as well. So overall, guys, for Foxcatcher, for my positives and negatives, I thought Steve Carell's performance was effectively creepy. You definitely were very creeped out by this guy. You never quite knew what he wanted. It was quite clear that he wanted this Mark Ruffalo character there for a reason. He wanted the Channing Tatum character there for a reason. And he's kind of just really messed up in the head. And also, for those who've seen Psycho, and I hope you've seen Psycho at this point, very classic film, by the way. Steve Carell's performance is very similar to that of Anthony Perkins' performance from Psycho when he played Norman Bates. They both love birds. They both have a mother that they are very committed to listening to and telling about, what's going on in their lives and everything, and the way they stare at things, the way they so basically, if you love Psycho and if you love the Norman Bates character as a villain, you're gonna love Steve Carell's performance as Johnny DuPont in this film because it's very creepy like that as well. Also, they did a lot of prosthetics on Steve Carell's face, so he almost looks unrecognizable in this film. It's just a very creepy performance, and I can definitely see why the Oscars might definitely go for the performance of Steve Carell as Johnny DuPont in this film because it is very effectively creepy. And if he wins the award, it will be, noteworthy, obviously, because it is such a creepy performance and a very different role for Steve Carell in general, since we're all seeing him, in comedic films, which is anything but in Foxcatcher. So another positive I have about Foxcatcher is I like the depiction of the brutality of Olympic wrestling. It really shows just how brutal it is, and just how these wrestlers really had to commit almost all their time and energy to train for these Olympic events, that they barely had any personal life at all, since they had to commit so much time to the gym and things like that, and the exercises and the workouts were really, really strict and brutal. And like I said, they just dedicate their lives to make this work, and it's easily understandable why they would get a lot of money for doing this, because it really is a huge time commitment, and they're representing their country and things of that nature. So I really liked how Bennett Miller depicted Olympic wrestling in this film. It definitely felt very appropriate for a film like this. Also, Mark Ruffalo's performance I thought was very good. I don't want to spoil why his role is so significant in this film. For those who know a lot about this real Foxcatcher event that this film is based off of, you obviously probably know his significance already if you really look up the information behind the real events of the story here. But the best way I can say it is Mark Ruffalo's performance is very good in here, and as the film progresses, his role becomes more important. And I think Mark Ruffalo definitely stands the test of time in this movie as far as making sure this performance is as best as he can possibly make it. Another huge positive I have about Foxcatcher is its depiction on dark friendships. It's really never quite a friendship between Steve Carell and Channing Tatum in this film. And I like how this film shows that it is technically a friendship. It is, a athlete to coach relationship of some kind, but it's not really a full on friendship. It's not like a best friend in high school or best friend in college kind of friendship. And it really just kind of shows kind of how flawed these two people were together, as they were working from an athlete to a coach and things like that. And just really like the depiction of dark friendship in this film. I think they definitely really nailed it here in this movie. For my negatives of Foxcatchers, because I do unfortunately have a few negatives with this movie. I think it is a good one watch kind of film. I really can't see myself wanting to go back to this film down the road. I can't see anybody walking out of this film wanting to own this on DVD or Blu-ray or digital HD of any kind. Like I said, it's just one of those films where you watch it once, you get it over with, you see how good Steve Carell's performance is, and then that's about it. It's really not a film that I can see myself watching several more times again, which I think are really, really good films, the best films ever made, really have that value to them. And fortunately, Foxcatcher does not have that value to it. And then that goes to my next negative, which I briefly covered earlier about Bennett Miller as a director. And so I guess in a way, this next negative is just about his directing career in general. I think he really needs to work on. I think this film was way too slow paced. I think it was way too slow. It took way too long to get its point across with things, and um, just really slow paced. Really, all these major story points were way too far apart from each other. I thought. I think Bennett Miller as a director really needs to work on pacing and figuring out how to quicken the story, tell the story accurately, while also telling the story at a more quicker pace. I think that's something that he really needs to work on. And then my next negative is even though Steve Carell's performance was great in this film, and because unfortunately he is well known for doing comedic performances, there is a little bit of unintentional comedic moments, I thought, with his character, just because we're just so used to seeing him take on comedic roles and he's so used to doing that. There's a lot of moments in here that came off kind of comedically, and I don't think Bennett Miller intended that, to be honest. So for those who were hoping for a completely serious, completely out of character performance from Steve Carell in this movie, there are a few little moments here and there where I think he tried to add maybe a little bit comedic vibe to them, maybe to make it more fun. I don't know what he was doing, but there was just a lot of moments in this film that felt like they were unintentionally comedic, and it kind of ruined the tone of the movie. So Like I said, love Steve Carell's performance in this, but there was a lot of unintentional comedic moments that really didn't need to be there. Also, I know a lot of people love Channing Tatum, and though his performance really isn't bad in this film, I thought it was a kind of a flat performance from Channing Tatum, to be honest. I really think they could have casted any big director they wanted to for the role that he had, as long as they bulked up and got muscular for this role, like Channing Tatum already has. But I really felt like his performance felt flat here. I really felt like he wasn't trying to do anything unique with this role. But I don't know. I really don't know a lot about this Olympic athlete. Maybe he was a lot like this personality wise. But to me, as far as performances go, good performances for films, Tatum's role really felt flat here for me. And I really wish that he could have done something more interesting with his character. And then that goes to, talking earlier about the slow pacing in this film. There's also a lot of really unnecessary scenes in this film, scenes that really don't need to be in this movie at all, scenes that really don't have anything to do with the subject matter of this film or building on characters or basically contributing anything to the storyline at all. So there's just a lot of scenes in here where I really wish I could have just sat down with the editor and be like, this scene doesn't need to be here, this does not need to be here, this does not need to be here, and this does not need to be here. Just a lot of unnecessary scenes. And then that goes to my last point. I really think this film has some pretty dull dialogue. Just a lot of scenes in this film where I kind of cringed at the dialogue. Just not very good dialogue. I don't know if Bennett Miller just doesn't have good taste in dialogue, if the screenplay writer just didn't know how to write good dialogue. But I think maybe that's another thing Bennett Miller could work on is he needs more interesting and intriguing dialogue in his films. Because if you're going to have these long takes like he likes to do, you got to have interesting dialogue to keep us interested the whole time. Because if you don't, that scene's going to get dull really quickly. And he does that a lot in this film, and he's done that a lot with his previous films, unfortunately, too. So overall, guys, I'm going to give Foxcatcher a 7.5 out of 10. I think Steve Carell's performance ultimately saves the film, and I think Mark Ruffalo's performance saved the film as well. It's a nice looking film, it's a well shot film, but it's not exactly a well paced film. It's not. I would have preferred a completely serious film the entire time rather than having all these unintentional comedic moments. I think Channing Tatum probably could have given up his role to a different actor, to be honest. I felt his performance, like I said, was once again pretty flat for the most part. Just a ton of unnecessary scenes and some pretty dull dialogue that, once again, I think Bennett Miller really needs to work on as a director in general. So, 7.5 out of 10 for me. It's a good one watch film. If you love Steve Carell, if you want to see him do a different kind of role, this might be worth one watch, maybe a good one time watch rental from Redbox. But if not, if you're really not really into, actors taking on unique roles and you just want an interesting story, this might not be the best film to go to. But overall, 7.5 out of 10 for me. If you love Steve Carell, see it. If you don't, just forget about it. So, Foxcatcher is an okay film.